welcome to the business end. Today's guest is someone I've known for decades, actually someone for 30 years, someone who embodies elite performance, discipline and resilience. Justin Fitzpatrick is a man who's gone toe-to-toe with the best in the world, 26 caps for Ireland, a European Cup winner with Ulster in 1999, and coaching stints has taken him from the Asian subcontinent to a World Cup with the US Eagles. But what makes Justin exceptional isn't his on-field achievements, it's the mindset behind them. Basically, from keeping a training diary in the early 90s to co-founding the business end with me, Justin has been at the intersection of high performance with business and sport for over 30 years. He's a great thinker, an innovator, a grafter, a leader on the pitch and on the business world, and now behind the mic, because he's going to be co-presenting this show. Today, we're going to break down the DNA of elite performance, leadership lessons from legends across the world of sport, the art of reinvention, and why sport remains his greatest teacher. I'm willing to learn an awful lot today from Justin, and I'm sure you will. Justin Fitzpatrick, welcome to the business end.
Thanks, Moo. Great to be here.
So, Justin, you weren't born, it's fair to say, into a rugby powerhouse in Bognor Regis. Bognor Regis is a long way from Lansdowne Road. As with all of our guests, the first thing we try to do is break down the DNA to say, what is it about Justin Fitzpatrick that's made him to play rugby, international rugby for Ireland? I mean, what's in your DNA? What's pushed you from being a local club player as a child to being a full-scale Irish international?
I think you're right there. I mean, when people think of rugby powerhouses, they don't necessarily think of Bognor Rugby Club, but it's where I fell in love with the game. It's where I was introduced to the game. It's a great club. Nobody goes there and doesn't have a good time. It's a great community club. It's full of characters and a lot of people that I'm very, very grateful for taking time and effort to help guide me and support me to this day. I love going back there as often as I can. It's a fantastic place. I think it's a combination between that and being very grateful to having two loving parents that spent a lot of time driving me around to different trials and games and tournaments and in my formative years and teaching me to have a great work ethic. As a young fella, I had lots of different jobs. That was very important for my parents, that I was out, working with, so whether it was a paper round or being a Saturday boy at a butcher's or, working in half terms or Christmas as I got older. It taught me the value of money. It taught me to have a work ethic. It taught me to mix in different groups, and I'm very, very thankful for that. It's helped me in good stead as I've grown up, and
I mean, it's fair to say, I would say, like parental stability is so important for any child when they're growing up. I remember when we were playing at London Irish, your family would all be there watching the games, which would have been a great source of confidence and support, and I suppose like rock for you to move forward. Some things you don't see, when you're watching sport, you see Justin Fitzpatrick performing, but there are things behind the scenes that probably people wouldn't know about you. I mean, I know from playing with you, competing often in the same position as you, there's something very much that I would say would set you apart from most players, and perhaps why you're an elite performer. And that was that you're always doing little things. I can remember that you would have a training diary, and that was before the game went professional, tracking things, writing everything down, always looking to improve. Where did that mindset come from?
Well, I think it really started at school, and it was mainly due to the fact I loved playing sports. I wasn't great at many sports, but I always enjoyed being out on the pitch. I loved my rugby, and when I got the opportunity to choose classes as you moved into GCSEs. I chose GCSE PE, and that was sort of my first foray into the other side of sport, the biomechanics, the sports exercise physiology, etc., etc. And it really sort of opened up my eyes to to the why. Why were we doing things? What and it was a great teacher. So I learned a lot of things there, and it sort of took me on a journey of lifelong love of learning. First for the medium of my passion, sport. I.e. rugby, and so I did sports studies at A level. I went to university and did a sports degree, and I learned a lot of things there that I was able to action within my own career, and I think that helps a lot.
Yeah, I mean, we've spoken about your parents and the influence of your parents, which were probably your first leaders, and still your leaders. But at London Irish and you at Ulster as well, we were very fortunate to have some of the probably the biggest leaders in the game of rugby. Some very, very iconic figures at London Irish. We both played under Sir Clive Woodward, who obviously went on to win a World Cup with England. We've had Willie Anderson, who coached Scotland and Ireland and is part of Irish folklore. We've had Dick Best, who coached British Lions in 1993 and Harlequins as well as England. And then obviously Ulster, you had the great Harry Williams. These coaches were all great leaders. I didn't play under Harry Williams, so I can't speak about him. But they've all shaped, I know that they shaped my business life and my career, my personal life as well. But what did each of those coaches, what did they teach you about leadership?
Yeah, I mean, I feel very privileged to have, I think, like you. I mean, the three that we played under, all great leaders, and and I've been very privileged throughout my career to work with and under some great coaches and learn different things from all of them. And it's amazing how similar and different each of them are to each other. On the ones you mentioned there, I mean, for Clive, I mean, again, lots of lessons from all of them, but the one thing that strikes me from my time with Clive was a real blue sky thinker, out of the box thinker. He was never scared to try something new or different, and just to see if it worked. A lot of people go through life, whether it be as a coach or in business or just in life in general, and never want to step outside of their comfort zone and try new things. Clive had no fear of doing that, and sometimes it was brilliant and sometimes it wasn't, and that's okay, right? When it was great, it really made a difference to what we were doing, and there's no harm in trying something and deciding it's that's not for us. So that was certainly one thing that I take from the time with Clive. With Willie, lots of things I learnt with Willie, but I would say probably the most impactful thing was his honesty. He never shied away from a direct conversation, from an honest conversation, whether he was delivering feedback or whatever context it was in. And I think that sounds simplistic. But in life, in my experience in business, in sport, it's often very easy to tell a little white lie because it's convenient in the moment, and and that is often leads to nowhere. You lose trust with the people that you're working with. You lose trust with your players, your partner, your business colleagues, whatever it is. And while you don't have to be cruel when you're honest, I think being honest and direct is the best policy. And it's hard. It's hard to tell, especially when you're having an uncomfortable conversation, to be honest. But Willie never shied away from that, and there was a big lesson to be learned there. In terms of Harry, Harry, very smart man, and had a great way about him, a lot of empathy to him. He put the player first. I mean, I'd moved from, after our time playing together, from London Irish to Belfast to play with Harry at Ulster, and I was one of two non-Ulstermen, Simon Mason being the other one, who I knew, I think you know from the Exiles as well, great man, and you know, not just us, but we were the outsiders coming in, and he made us feel very, very welcome, very much part of the family, very much part of the team, very much part of the community. He had a lot of empathy, and you know, and I think that's, you know, when you're leading any organization, you know, having that personal touch is incredibly important, and Harry certainly had that, and something that I try my very best to mimic and incorporate in my dealings, that personal touch and getting to know people. And lastly, there with Dick, I mean, Dick, very organised, great thinker of the game, great planner of the game, and he really showed me, you know, how to think about the problems that were coming, to think your way through a game. You know, often, you know, in the early days of that transition from amateur to professionalism, you know, it's okay, well, let's just work harder and we'll do the same thing, but, you know, but at a greater ferocity. And you know, while working hard is incredibly important, it's a foundation to everything you do in life. You know, being able to think your way through a problem, being able to analyze a problem is, you know, map out a plan. And he was a great fella for that, in terms of, you know, what are we going to be facing this weekend? What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? And not just him telling us, but him drawing that information out. So he was a great man for sort of pushing and pulling information, so you were thinking. And I think if you can't get up in front of people and explain a concept, then you don't really know it. And while that, I found at that young age, was very uncomfortable, it was an incredibly important lesson.
Yeah, I think that the common theme, I mean, a lot of what you see about all of these coaches isn't, you know, when you go behind the curtains, as you say, is very different to how sometimes they're portrayed in the media. But obviously, I can't speak about Harry, but what I will say about the other three coaches that perhaps people won't realise, is I would say all of them had a personal touch, and empathy, and they cared about the players. So Clive Woodward was. One skills to Clive, I think one of his best skills, apart from the fact he was an innovator and an organizer, was the fact that when he recruited, he would make an effort to get you in, to bring you in. He'd take you out for lunch. And I remember that as a personal touch. Willie Anderson was a guy who generally just loved the players. As you say, he was not. He was a great guy for showing care. And he was a great guy for what we call fierce caring. So I'm sure we'll discuss on later podcasts, where he's not afraid to have difficult conversations, but underneath it all, you always knew he had the best interests of the heart and the team. And he was a great coach. You know, Dick Best, there's so many stories about Dick, and we're going to get him on to speak to us in the future. But what a lot of people don't realise is the personal lengths he would get to get people involved in the team, and to make them feel part of the family. And he was a great strategist, and his leadership skills we'll discuss with him as well. But it's a personal touch and empathy, I think, was a common theme with all of these coaches. And going on now to another aspect of your career, where I think that you brought into your business life now, is resilience. So we talked about this tour a lot. Not many people know about this tour, and this is your breakthrough position really into the Ireland squad, as you went on an Emerging Ireland tour to New Zealand and the Pacific Islands. And it was the coach there, Brian Ashton, who's well known for Bath. He was involved in England. And he was the head coach. And you often describe this tour as basically a brutal experience. What did that experience teach you about resilience, and more importantly, yourself?
Yeah, I mean, Brian Ashton, another great coach, great thinker of the game, great innovator of the game, and as you say, that was my breakthrough moment in a lot of ways. I wasn't selected to go on that tour initially, and so there was a certain amount of luck involved. Peter was running at the same time as the Lions tour to South Africa, and Peter Closey had been selected for the Lions, and he'd hurt his back, and Paul Wallace, who'd been selected for the Emergent Island tour, got drafted up to the Lions, and that went very well. We had a great tour, played in all the tests, etc., and I got pulled up to the Island tour. And as you say, we spent 5 weeks in New Zealand and a week in Samoa after a week in Limerick. So it was a pretty long, arduous tour, and I didn't understand the methodology. I think there was a lot of naivety in my mind. I'd never been at that in that environment before, so I'm just drinking life through a fire hose, getting through the days. But when I spoke to Brian many years later at a coaching conference, I asked him about it, and he said to me, Fitz, I didn't know the players when I came in. We had, I think, 18 months until a World Cup. I needed to find out real quick who had mental toughness, who could get through a volume of work, who wouldn't crack under pressure, because I knew we could put the detail on the game, but we needed those characteristics first and foremost. And I had no idea at the time. I certainly wasn't going to go up and ask him, why are we doing this, Brian? I was just doing whatever I was told as hard as I could, recovering as much as I can, and then rinsing and repeating and going again. And so that's and it was very, very tough. We were having 2-hour sessions, one in the morning, one in the afternoon, often broken in between with a weight session, and playing our way around the North Island and then into Samoa against some great teams and some great players. And it was a steep learning curve, but through it, I dug deep. We were working with Willie at the time, and Willie was known for his work ethic and the sessions that and hard sessions we put in. So I wasn't afraid of hard work. So I just how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. I just next job, next session, recover as much as I could in between, and go again. And all of a sudden you're through to the test weeks, and I feel privileged to have been selected, played okay, and got brought into the Ireland squad.
Yeah, that's an important point, is to concentrate, as you say, small bites, taking things one step at a time. So anyone that's facing challenges in their business or even in their personal life, the best way to tackle it is to tackle one small step at a time, which is what you did on the tour. And I'm sure it's a great life experience that you bring into your life. I mean, when I speak to business people, they always want to know, what is it that makes someone an elite performer? What is it about Justin Fitzpatrick which makes him to be an international rugby player? You could be the most successful business person in the world and have the most money in the world, but they all crave to be that elite performer. You said in the past that improvement was never about massive leaps. It's about taking those daily inches. What does elite performance really look like on a day-to-day basis for you?
Well, I mean, there's so many lessons that you can take out of rugby, of sport. I mean, it's a great incubator for leadership. As we're going to discuss more and more as we go through with different guests. But the one thing for me would be Kaizen, and it's a Japanese philosophy of incremental improvement. And I didn't know what that was until relatively recently, but I understood the process. Matt Williams had introduced it as a concept, and he didn't use the word, and he didn't give the history of it. It was probably superfluous for the message he was giving us all at the time, but that's what it was. And how can I be 1% better every day, or how can I be 1% better in this, this, and this every day, and layering and layering that improvement. Often when we, goal setting is very important. It's another great tool that, that we would use and in sport all the time. Short, medium, long-term goals. What are we going to get out of training today? What's our goal for this week? What's our goal for this month? What's our goal for the season? Whatever it is. But and that's all very, very important. But with goal setting, sometimes, especially when you're medium, long-term goals, it's very easy to get distracted in between, and you've got to sort of stage it out, in my mind. At least that's how I approach it. And that sort of Kaizen philosophy of sort of breaking it down into much smaller bites, and how can I be better, whether it's in personal relationships, whether it's in a business relationship, whether it was in sport, whether it was me personally, could I be hydrated better today, this week, this month? Could I make a percentage improvement week on week or over a fortnight in the gym, or whatever it is? You break it down into those smaller bites, those manageable bites, and off you go. And then in no time at all, you've seen those incremental changes. They all add up, and you've made some real tangible process that you can see, but also others can see as well.
Yeah, I think from a business side, I very much adopt that philosophy. So for me, I run a recruitment business, and the first thing I do is I set targets, like daily KPIs. So like
Yeah.
I must, approach or interview at least 5 candidates, and so I've got and I actually break down the day. This is what I've got to do each hour. So everything is structured. How I improve is obviously each aspect of that particular area of the day. You're looking for ways that you can improve, always researching, and things like that. And then normally, as we discussed in the past, a very important message from sport: if you concentrate on just improving bit by bit by bit every single day, all of a sudden the results start looking after themselves. So if you're in a business and you're down on the cash flow and you're losing money, if you go back to basics, strip it down, and then just concentrate on hitting your targets and improving, and not panicking about the fact that your cash flow is down, all of a sudden things start picking up. Just in one thing as well, I think that I've picked up with you and playing with you is that you're very much like a calming influence on the changing room. You're a very calm, level-headed guy. Was that something you cultivated, or just in your nature?
I think a little bit of both. I think definitely, personality wise, I'm fairly even keeled. I do have a bit of a temper, but it takes a lot to provoke it out of me. The what?
It takes a lot to poke the bear.
There we go. Yeah, exactly. But within that, and obviously, I'm human like us all, so I have emotions, and certainly in sports, it's a real incubator for emotions. You're up 1 minute, you've won, you're down, you've been dropped, you've been picked, you're injured, whatever. So you are on this emotional roller coaster, day to day, week to week, month to month, and I found it didn't serve me to to flow with those emotions, right? So I made a special effort, and perhaps, as I say, I'm fairly even keeled, so it was, wasn't too difficult to manage my emotions and try, and try never to be too far up and never to be too far down. The truth's always somewhere in between. It doesn't matter how good a victory you've had at the weekend. There's always another task to do the following weekend. So not to give too much into it. And conversely, when you're going through a bad spell, whether it be in sport, business, or life, it's never as bad as you think it is. And if you're able to step back, not give in to your emotions overtly. You can assess it, you can figure out where you're going wrong, and just like you were saying there a moment ago, Moo, if your cash flow in business isn't going the way you want it, look at it, make your problem, come back to basics. And that's very much, the way I sort of approached, keeping the emotional side of the game in check.
So another thing about elite performance is how you perform under pressure. So let me take you back to your first cap for Ireland and the amount. I mean, firstly, most of us frustrated business people think, what are you feeling to put on the Irish jersey for the first time, and how do you cope with those emotions and the pressure that you're under to perform? And can you give us some tips on that and explain how you felt as well?
Yeah, I mean, a dream come true. I mean, it was something that I'd, dreamt about for many years. That I'd worked very hard to put myself into that position. And when my name got read out, we were on tour in South Africa at the time to play the Springboks in my first test. The world champions. I mean, you're cock a hoop. I mean, it's amazing. In terms of the practicalities, I would, and again, I didn't know it at the time, but you're sort of taking that sort of Kaizen philosophy. Okay, what is my job here? What is my next job? Okay, it's a scrum. I've got to get that right. Put 100% effort into it. Okay, what's after that? Okay, I'm getting out. Where do I fit into the game plan? Am I to the breakdown? Am I around the corner? Or I'm in support? Where can I offer best value within the team structure? So it's small bites, small bites, small bites, and looking at that performance, and when things don't go to plan, and again, there's many times when that happens, especially when you're playing the world champions. Okay, throwing it away and moving on to the next job, not dwelling in it, and just small bites, small bites, small bites.
Yeah, I mean, I remember speaking of Dick Best, so we lost quite a few games on the trot, and we had a run up of games, and I said to him, I was thinking in my mind, like, how are we going to beat these teams? How are we going to? And I was worrying about the end performance, and that was pressurizing me, and it was causing me, I was so worried about the end result, I couldn't concentrate on my own performance, and that's what it's about when you play the game. Or if you're in business, you just concentrate on those small KPIs. You don't get distracted, and that's how you cope. That's how you cope with pressure. Just one quick question. I mean, did your family? I hope did your family go to the first game? The first.
They did, yeah. I mean, I think if I remember correctly, it was announced internally on a Wednesday, and I got. As soon as the meeting was over, and I phoned my parents, and they were there by the Friday. I mean, as I said, I've got a great mum and dad, and they've been all around the world supporting me. As you said, they used to come up. They used to love coming up to London Irish. They used to love going to Ulster and to Cast, and they've been around the world and had a lot of fun doing it, and I'm very, very grateful for their support along the journey.
Did you have a load of converted Irish fans down at the clubhouse at Bognor Regis?
Well, as I said, I mean, nobody goes there and doesn't have fun. It's a great club, and when I was playing for London Irish, at least on one occasion, but possibly more than that. It's a long time ago now, as we know, Moo. But they took buses up. We'd fill buses up to come up and support. And they were, they were great people, and a lot of them came and followed the journey in Ulster for games, and some came to France, and very, very grateful for the friendship and support that I've had from the club over those years, and still today.
Yeah, and obviously from that you went on to great things, winning the European Cup with Ulster. You moved on to play in France as well. But then life after rugby, at some point, the show's got to end, and your rugby career ends. You had a plan in place for that, but you still described it as absolutely devastating. What to you is the hardest part of making that transition from rugby into the business world?
Well, I think that, I mean, as you say, I mean, I haven't spoken to any player And I don't think it's necessarily just, as a pro. Obviously, there's more things hanging in the balance as a pro. You've got a mortgage to pay. There's a financial element to it. But I think it's a loss of identity to any rugby player when they finally hang up the boots. It's such a great community, and it's all encompassing. So when you're finally not that player anymore, there's a I certainly felt it was a real loss of identity. I'd been Justin Fitzpatrick, the rugby player, for you know all my life until that point. 30 odd years, and then all of a sudden I wasn't. Now, I'd been around a long time, and I'd seen a lot of my peers retire, and we all went through that, and some thrived, and some struggled for a while, and I wanted to make sure I had a plan, and I thought about it for a long time, and decided I wanted to go into coaching. And I was very, very lucky with the support I had at Ulster and with the IRFU. With Mike Reid, I negotiated my final contract with Ulster, and I knew it was going to be my final contract. And so did he, and we agreed upon, as I played less, I'd be given more time and opportunity to coach, and I'm very, very grateful for that. And he was true to his word, and so was the club, and I had a lot of opportunities to explore and grow, and that was great. And also within the IRFU, had Stephen Aboud, who was running the coaching department, and Colin Moran, who's still there now, and two great fellas. Could pick the phone up to them and troubleshoot problems at any point. They ran great courses. They were great mentors, both then and a long time afterwards, even when I'd left Ireland. And I'm very, very grateful for that. But it was hard, as I say, loss of identity. You're also having to, while I'd given, several seasons before, incrementally doing a little bit more each season. So I built up my skills so I could put myself in a position where I could, command a salary as a coach. You're still starting. You have to learn the trade. I mean, there's certain things as a player, being in a good environments. You've seen certain things, but you haven't necessarily delivered them. So you're having to learn your trade, on the fly. That's tough. You're also, you're not with all your mates. With simple things which I hadn't considered at all, really, which obviously seems self-evident now. But as a player, your days are structured, your weeks are structured, your months are structured, your seasons are structured. Everything's laid out. Okay, it's I'm wearing the red kit today. It's the blue kit tomorrow. I've got this session here. I know that's going to be a hard one. I've got conditioning here. Everything's mapped out, and you know what it's going to look like. And all of a sudden, you're not in that environments, you're not with all your mates, and you're having to take back control and ownership of your day to day. And that seems self-explanatory, but when you've been in that environment and been so well catered for, it takes a bit of adjusting to.
Yeah, you made some really important tips I'm sure any athlete retiring now can learn from, and perhaps you don't realise them as well, being the humble guy that you are. But the first one I would say is you planned. You knew it was coming, and you planned. Obviously, some athletes don't have the benefit of that. They have a career-ending injuries. But the second thing you mentioned is quite crucial. You use the network to help give you support. You discussed it with people. You communicated with people, and you relied on that network, which probably gave you you lose that safety blanket of the team environment where everything is planned. But if you've got a network there of support, that's how you get through that period. I mean, some players find it harder than others. Some players miss the adulation as well, and I didn't play to the level that you did, but you kind of miss the buzz sometimes of playing, and and obviously, as you say, you lose your identity. But very quickly, you move on, and you help build another identity. That's what you've got to do. And you went into coaching and then business. How did that help build your identity after rugby?
Yeah, I mean, rugby sport is, as we've spoken about, as we're going to speak to with a lot of people, it's a great incubator for life lessons. So many things that we would take for granted are just being normal within sport. You can cut and paste and put into your life, the ability to, I'm just thinking, the ability to take feedback, really important, as a business owner to be able to give it and take it, and as an employer, a team member, to be able to absorb that, is a good way of doing it. But, that's a great skill from rugby that follows through, and as you're getting feedback from everybody as a sports person, right? The coach, the players, yourself, the family, the fans, the media. So it's you've got to have pretty thick skin, and you've got to be able to shift through what's worthwhile and necessary, and what's BS. So there's a lot of lessons. And as we've talked about, planning, I planned into it. I planned, through it, what I was going to do, as I moved into coaching, how I was going to break up the season, how I was going to periodize what we were doing, how I was going to help individual players, the units, the team, the structure I was going to put involved. And I think that's, it doesn't mean you don't change it. You don't want to be too rigid, but I think, if you start with the end in mind and have an idea of where you want to get to in a season or a calendar year or a month or whatever time period you're looking at, it allows you to work back from, okay, I'm here now, I want to get here. What are the steps that I've got to put in place to give myself the best opportunity to get that? And then you work that plan. So there were a lot of lessons that came very naturally to me. I just had to reframe them in a different context, if that makes sense, because I was always focused on me within the unit, within the team. But when you're then thinking in a broader context, how do I help others do what they want to do? So just reframing the things that that we were doing every day.
Yeah, I mean, identity is rebuilding your identity after a career in rugby is quite a difficult question, actually, to answer. But what I will say about it is, from my own experience, I wanted a new challenge. I was ready. I was ready to move on. I threw myself into business. I didn't get involved with rugby, but at various points in my life, and this is important, I think, for sports people to know, rugby would always crop up. Like you, I lived in France for one period of my life, and so I wasn't as good as French as you, clearly, but like I was struggling with the language.
I don't know about that, Liam.
Wait, I'm only speak, but like in French. But the thing is that I found that basically when they found out that you played rugby, it would just open doors, naturally open doors. The business community, they're interested. And it's a hard thing to go through, but you do eventually. The storm subsides, and you do find your own identity, and where we are now. I mean, now we're in 2025. You're the CEO of Adelhard, which is a premium performance brand, and also through the Resilient Leaders Playbook, you coach leaders and you share powerful stories that we've learned during the career. But what would be the lessons, I suppose, from rugby that have proven the most transferable to business for you?
Well, as I say, so many lessons. But I would say, and I sort of touched on this a moment ago, I read a book by Stephen Covey, 7 Habits of many years ago, and it stuck with me. I go back to it time and time again, and he talks about starting with the end in mind. And I think that's so important, whether it's whether it's personal, whether it's, in your relationships, whether it's in business, whether it's in sport, what is it you want to achieve? What is the target? And it may be a short, medium or long-term goal, but having that idea of where you want to end up, and then recognizing and being self-aware as to where you are now, and then having those 2 points of either end of the plan, you can work backwards to what you need to do to get you where you need to get to. And I've always found that to be incredibly helpful. I think being adaptable and is also something that is incredibly important, and you learn that through sport. You have to be adaptable, on a week-to-week basis in terms of, okay, you've got to adapt the game plan, adapt what you're contributing towards the team and the unit, maybe on a week-to-week basis, because not all oppositions play the same way. So you've got to change what your focus is on a week-to-week basis. And we talked about transitioning out of sport into business. Or coaching, as it was for me at the time, and you've got to adapt. You can't stay the same, and that's life. You constantly have to change and evolve, and there's some thought that needs to be put into it. I've certainly made the mistake, and I've seen others make the mistake where it's like, okay, well, this worked for me and this problem's similar to that, so I'll do the same thing with that, without really thinking through the steps and understanding it. So having that sort of awareness and that adaptability is really important. And and what do I mean by that? And it's another thing that Coveney spoke about, which has always stuck with me. He said, he used a map analogy. He said, if you're looking to get from the Empire State Building in New York to the Statue of Liberty, you don't use a map of Chicago. Right? There's nothing wrong with the map of Chicago. It's brilliant for Chicago, but it won't get you where you need to go in New York. And it's that sort of adaptability, self-awareness, being able to analyze, and we did that on a day-to-day, session-to-session, week-to-week basis, as we spoke about earlier, analysing the opposition, analysing our own strengths, and then making that plan. So I think, many things, but those things strike me as the ones I've lent on the most.
Just on that point, you mentioned, obviously we're talking about leaders, we've gone on about the coaches, but there's one guy where we played with some great players who are great leaders as well. But there was one quote or one message from a chap called Brendan Venter, who played for the Springboks in the 1995 World Cup, which you talk about, which really is an important message. Would you like to tell? It's a really kind of gold, very simple, but it's a golden nugget. Would you like to tell the viewers what he used to say to us?
Keep the main thing. And he would say it again and again and again, So what is the problem we're trying to solve here? Whether that's a short-term goal, a medium-term goal, long-term goal, what is it? Okay. And then, and again, it comes back to that analogy I used there with the New York and Chicago map, right? If you don't have the right map or framework, you're not going to get where you need to do, where you need to be. So identifying what the problem is, and Brendan was a great one for getting to the root problem, the root cause, and then you can make a plan and work it, and I think that's something we haven't talked about, which is also a foundation. We can talk about principles, we can talk about knowledge, and all those things are incredibly important, but hard work, right? Rolling your sleeves up, doing the donkey work, day after day out, and especially when you don't want to do it. And there have been many times in my life, when I've been sick, tired and sore, where I didn't want to get up and go training in every morning. We talked about how tough the emerging island tour was in New Zealand. And there were many, many mornings I didn't want to roll out of bed. I was stiff, tired and sore. But you do. And, you take another step forward and another step forward. And all of a sudden, your name's being called out. in a team room, and you're pulling on that jersey on a match day. And it's the same in business. You've got that contract. You've got your results in, and they're looking pretty healthy, or your team's won at the weekend, or whatever it is. But you've got to put that work in to get there.
Yeah, it's a very important point. It's often the small things that you think, it's a waste of time doing that.
Yeah.
Just don't get a result from it, and you think, well, thank goodness, goodness if I didn't do that or didn't put the effort in. So sometimes little small menial tasks that you don't want to do, the ones that you've got to do. I mean, it's fair to say, like feedback, resilience, adaptability, you've nailed all three. But which of those do you think that business leaders struggle with the most?
I think it depends on the individual, right? And again, it's looking at yourself. You've got to have that self-awareness to where am I at now? What part of my toolbox do I need to sharpen up to be better at? And it's the same for different leaders. Obviously, if you are a leader and you're running a business, you've got some skills. You've been successful. If you've stayed in that arm wrestle for any period of time, but it's being self-aware to realize that there's always improvements to be had. And I think, and you called this out earlier, and it's we've been very lucky within the environments we've been in, the rugby community, the mentorship, whether it's directly from a coach at the time, or as you mentioned later on in life within the community, there's a lot of people out there with great knowledge, and by and large, not exclusively, but by and large, I've never been afraid to ask for help or ask for advice. I pride myself on my observation skills, and it's like, okay, this guy knows more about this than I do, and ask the question. And most people are very, very happy to help you. And I think that's being open and being coachable and being a consistent lifelong learner is the key to success. So, within, to answer your sort of question there, it changes from individual to individual. And I think, I've certainly enjoyed, as you say, writing and speaking with people via the Resilient Leaders Playbook and having conversations with people and saying, well, have you thought about this? What about that? And, helping people from the hard-earned lessons that we've had within sport, and generally speaking, it's very well received.
Yeah, I think being in business myself, there's three things I think that business leaders struggle with. The first is actually taking criticism. And I've written about this in the past. It tends to be because business leaders are very much passionate about what they do. I wrote something about boxers, and I was looking at a load of boxers on a podcast series, and every time they got criticised, they were visibly irritated by the question. The reason being isn't because necessarily nasty so and so. It's because they've got that in their own mind. They've got such confidence, and they can't feel any weakness around them. And it's the same actually for CEOs and companies. So they struggle with that. Number two is they struggle with actually giving constructive feedback. They rather bury their head in the sand, as you say, tell a few little white lies. All of a sudden it builds up into a big monster, and they don't have difficult conversations. The third thing is like adaptability. They struggle with adaptability, and all of these things we learn from sport. We've got to be able to take criticism. We don't like it sometimes. We've got to be able to give criticism in a way that's constructive and with care, with everyone's interest. And we've got to be adaptable. We get different coaches that come in and change, and we've got to change with it. And so, I mean, going on now to the business end, which you've co-founded with me.
Sorry, Boo, can I come back to what you said, because you're 100% correct there, and it reminded me as you were speaking there of the best way I saw it framed in terms of feedback was by Matt Williams, coached us at Ulster, coached Scotland, Leinster, smart guy, and he said feedback. It's not positive, it's not negative, it's just feedback. And as you say, it sometimes can be potentially hurtful to have a home truth, especially when it's spoken out loud, right, in a team meeting or a business boardroom or whatever. And there is good ways of delivering messages, and that isn't a skill to himself. But we also, it's having that sort of coachable mindset. And I don't think, as I say, I'm a great advocate. I don't think, doesn't matter where you are, on the spectrum of the totem pole, so to speak, whether you're the CEO or you're the janitor, it doesn't matter. We can all be better. We can all learn things, and being able to be able to take feedback and not take it to heart, and use the example of the the boxers. But ultimately and effectively, we make that decision to allow it to hurt us or not, right? And if we talked earlier about staying even keeled emotionally, and that can be harder sometimes than it is others, especially from someone we really respect, and it's perhaps not delivered in the most empathetic way, but we still get to make that decision as to how we absorb it. And and I try, I'm not always perfect at it, to listen, absorb it, and then work through it. Is there something in this? Right? Is there a lesson to be learned here, or is it BS? And sometimes it's BS, and we throw it away. But that really helped me. I was like, okay, it's okay to give feedback. It's okay to receive back, and if I'm going to be better, and again, I'm very competitive like yourself. If it's going to help me be better, I want to hear it. I want that nugget, right? Even if it's perhaps not worded in the right way. I hope it is, but if it's not, I don't care. I want to be better, because that's going to help me.
It takes a lot of mental strength to take criticism. I'm probably slightly going off piste here, but I was watching something about Roy Keane and Alex Ferguson, the great Sir Alex Ferguson, and about leadership. And and the story about when he got sacked at Man United when they lost 4-1 to Middlesbrough, and he's on Man United TV, slating the performance, criticising the teammates. But what he talks about is one aspect of that is that Alex Ferguson demanded that he went through the video with all the players. And I thought, if I was in that position, I'd be going mad, the football coach. But his reaction to that is, why not? Said nothing wrong. I'll go and listen to it. So he sat through the video and watched it with all the players. I mean, obviously, it led to a big fallout, but he had the mental strength to be able to deal with the criticism of that. But
when it comes back we've both talked about there in terms of those little white lies. Sometimes it feels expedient to take the path of least resistance and say something that's not quite accurate, or is a half truth, and whereas it's better to refine your skills and give honest feedback, even if it is close to the bone. Yes, it's better for you, it's better for the organization, and it's better for the individual. And we can all be better at giving feedback. There's no doubt about that. And knowing the people you're giving to the feedback and how to tailor it, that's also another skill.
It's the intent of the feedback, whether it's like destructive or it's meant to be constructive, and it's also the recipient of the feedback that they view it as constructive rather than destructive as well. But I mean, going on to the business end, I mean, me and you over the years, we've had some serious conversations. We're talking about everything from bad scrimmaging, position of tight head props to boardroom strategy, but it always comes down to the same thing. It comes down to the memories. It comes down to the stories, comes down to the coaches we play with, the players that we play with, moments, the laughs, the tactics, how to lead, how to overcome challenges, and how to stay standing when everything around us says you shouldn't.
100%. And we keep coming back to these conversations because they're too valuable to stay between us.
Yeah.
We've spoken over the years about mindset and identity after retirement, which is very, very, helpful to be able to reach out to your peers, have gone through the same things, and, and how did they deal with it? We've come back to that realization. More people need to hear about this. There are so many nuggets that we learned through the game that are worth sharing, that we've been able to take through into the next stages of our careers, and given us success. And I think these are conversations so worthwhile having.
Yeah, and this is what the business end is all about, right? It's taking the experience, the lived experience through business and sport, and it's turning this into messaging and information and tips that other people can use. So, I mean, why did you say yes to co-founding the show? Obviously, you're a big chap, and I can't bend your arm, but why did you say yes?
You were always a lot stronger than me, so I don't know about that. But yeah, I mean, it's. I keep coming back to it. I mean, there's so many things that that we can learn from the guests that we've got lined up, that we've learned from each other along the way. So many valuable conversations. That adaptability. I mean, we've spoke about a number of different things, but having that being able to transition from one problem to the next, one stage of your life to the next, and hopefully being able to impart some of that information not just to business leaders, but also to other athletes that are going through that stage of their career as well, and helping them plan and understand the pitfalls and the opportunities that are out there.
Yeah, and it's more than just a podcast. It's actually a business network. It's a business community full of people that want to learn messages about leadership, resilience, overcoming challenges, mental toughness, all of these things. Whether these people could be leaders, CEOs of companies, they could be sports people looking to make that transition. They could be individuals that are facing challenges perhaps in their private life, but this is our information that we've learned and we want to share.
100%. And also want to learn, right? We spoke about being lifelong learners, and and trying to crack other people's DNA and their secret sauce, and so we've got some great guests lined up, and I'm excited to learn from them, and what can I bring into my life, what can I bring into my business, what little nugget can I take away and work on, and that's great. And I think we have been incredibly privileged to be in some great environments, and I'm really excited to see what we can learn.
Yeah, so I mean, if you're tuning in, you're going to learn from every episode, whether you're, like I said before, you're a CEO of a global company, or you're an individual that's trying to get through life and perhaps facing some challenges. From every person that comes on the show, there's a lesson, there's a story, or there's a spark in every episode.
So, yeah. Couldn't agree more. Incredibly excited about it. But question for you, Moo. Why did we call it the business end? It was you came up with the idea. What was the spark that got it going?
Well, because I mean, the business end is quite used to get great leaders. First and foremost, you hear Lawrence Dallaglio constantly going, "Well, it's a business end of the season." You think that sounds quite impressive, but of course, what he's talking about is very true. It's true, because there comes a certain point on the pitch where absolutely everything matters. There's a certain point in your business life where everything matters. There's stuff that happens in your personal life where everything matters. That crucial time, you've got to do something. You've got to step up, and that is the business end.
So, well said.
Now, so at the end of the show, we always have a quick fire round where we like to put the guests on the spot. So, Fitzy, as your co-founding co-founding the show. You can't get away with this, so you have to bear with me because I have to read out these questions off the script. But firstly, Fitzy, who's a leader or player that most inspired you and why?
There have been many, but if I had to pick one, I would say Paddy Johns. He was the captain of the Irish team when I won my first cap. I had the privilege of playing against him when he was at Saracens and we were at London Irish, and then later on we played together at Ulster and got to know him very well. Consider him a good friend, but the consummate professional. Way before many could wear that title with any honesty. He was always looking at ways he could be better. And I'd look at him sometimes with different things. It's like, really? Does that matter? But it all matters. And and I've learned that through time. We've spoken about it. It's those little layers of improvement. And he was a great man for doing it. And he would, he just focused on the next job, the performance, and layering of improvements, and took a lot away from it. Great man, great player, hard man, and a consummate professional.
We'd like to be a suntan cream, suntan cream, which but that's another story, Fitz.
Another story for another day, perhaps. But yes, there was a
true,
time.
Is it?
Well, yes. So we were we were in South Africa, and Warren Gatland was the head coach at the time, and he was a great coach, obviously very successful, but he was always looking for an edge, a psychological edge. And he'd made the observation with the world champions, the Springboks at the time, that, obviously the weather's a bit better there than it is in Ireland generally. And these guys were, big beefy guys, and they were all tanned. And then he sort of looked around the room at us, and most of us were pale, pasty paddies. And he said, guys, I've got an idea, give us, look a bit better, make us look a bit more athletic. Let's get some self-tan on and bronze ourselves up a little bit. And, I carry a bit of sun, so I was like, I don't need that. It's in the summer after a week in South Africa, I'm pretty tan, so I didn't go for it. But Paddy is pretty pasty, and he's always looking for those improvements, amongst others. And he put some of that self tan on, but practically he's like, well, the only things that are going to be seen of me are going to be elbow down and from the bottom of the shorts through to the socks. So that's what he self-tanned up, which was a little bit bizarre, in between. But when it came to the game, what we didn't realise was that particular brand of self-tan ran when you sweated. So it got to half-time, and the guys that had self-tanned up looked like zebras, not these bronze Adonises that we were hoping for.
Yeah, and I think Warren Gatland perhaps didn't realise that, of course, like Bognor Regis is like the English Riviera, and you have a bit of sun down there, yeah?
Well, actually, if you look at Wikipedia, that's exactly how it's described.
Yeah. So moving on, so what would be your one tip for overcoming life's biggest challenges?
Well, as we talked about, sport, business life could be a bit of a roller coaster, it's full of highs and lows, and I love history, and I heard a quote from Churchill, which I'm very fond of, especially when things aren't going well. And he said, if it's not fatal, it's not final. Meaning, if you're not dead, you can get up off the ground after you've been knocked down, and you can go again. And you can use, it's like, I think Michael Jordan said it: knock down 6, get up 7, right? And I think that's those two great maxims for life.
Okay, and what one skill could every business leader learn from sport?
Well, and you nailed it earlier, Moo: adaptability. right? Being able to, because it doesn't matter how good or how successful you are in the moment, markets change, teams change, leagues change, opposition change, your personal circumstances change, and you've got to understand where you are, where you want to go, and be adaptable enough to ride with the current.
Okay, and what's the one principle you always live by?
Start with the end in mind, right? If I'm looking at any project, anything in my life, where do I want to be? Where's that final destination in this particular episode, problem, whatever it is, task? Understand where I am now, and then work a plan back.
Yeah. So, I mean, in terms of, we're here now in 2025. So, what's next for Justin Fitzpatrick?
Well, got a lot going on, as you mentioned, with Adelhart and with the Resilient Leaders Playbook, and I'm excited to be working with you in the business end. So those are my three. Seems quite a lot, and it's going to keep me busy. But I'm not shy of hard work, and I'm excited about it. As we talked about for the show, we're going to have the privilege of speaking to some incredibly interesting and successful people, and I want to know what their secret sauce is. I want to learn from them, and as much as I want to help share that information and impart it on others and be the conduit for that. But selfishly, I want to learn as much as I can, and I want to be better, and I want to be live, be successful and live my dreams.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about learning what the secret sauce is for anyone that's achieved anyone, even if you've achieved yourself. Like you. So I'd like to wrap up this first episode. It's been fantastic speaking to you, Justin, not just for the stories, but showing us what elite performance looks like, sharing your golden experience of working under some amazing leaders. Your career has been about resilience, adaptability, relentless self-improvement, whether you've been playing in France, lifting a European Cup, or as you do now, guided coaching leaders in boardroom. You've always kept the same mindset. You show up, get better results, and lead, and you're a humble guy. This episode basically is a masterclass in what matters most on the pitch and in life. And thanks for us looking behind the curtain and learning from you today, Justin. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks, Mo. It's been a pleasure. I'm looking forward to collaborating with you.
Thanks, Fitzy.
Thanks, Mo.